friend is coming soon. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite Creator.
The DuPont Bloodline, a dynasty of Satanic royalty. There has been no consistency among the DuPont family members in the spelling they have employed to write their name. The correct variations in spelling the DuPont name are as follows: DuPont, and DuPont de Nemours. In English the second syllable is accented. In French, neither syllable is accented. The name has tended to be spelled DuPont for the family and DuPont for business. The DuPonts reminded me of two other families. Recently, John Coleman, a researcher on the elite, commented to me that when he had researched the Queen of Denmark he had discovered that the royal Danish family was slipping away secretly from everyone and they were going to satanic rituals. European royals allegedly killing children in human hunting parties, 4 eyewitnesses testify. It is also noteworthy that 5 modern kings of Denmark have been the leaders of Freemasonry in Denmark, and the Danish royal family, princes etc. have been active Masons. John Dale wrote a book The Prince and the Paranormal, which goes into the secret occult activities of the British royal family, especially Prince Charles, but also many other royal family members too. Besides the secret occult activities of the British monarch, they have been openly leaders of Freemasonry. The DuPonts are similar to these families in that they too are a dynasty, they too have a very public image, and they too have a totally hidden life. In fact, the DuPonts have better control over the press's coverage of them than the British royal family. One of the clues that the family is a top satanic family are the frequency of marriages between relatives of the DuPont descendants. Few people are aware of the immense importance bloodlines play in the upper levels of Satanism. Blood is believed to carry the occult power. Unless a person has the correct blood, he or she will not rise to the highest levels of Satanism. The DuPonts have intermarried with the Balls and the Gardners. These other families are known to be involved with the Illuminati and Satanism. For instance, George W. Ball is on the important permanent steering committee of the Bilderbergers and has attended the Bilderberger meetings that I know of, starting with the original first meeting in 1954. Plus in 1955, 1957, 1963, 1964, 1966, 1967, 1968, 1974, 1975. George W. Ball is also a member of CFR and the Trilateral Commission. Eliza Cazenove, Gardner was a sister to a DuPont. Dorsey Cazenove, Gardner was a distant cousin. Will Gardner and Bessie Gardner DuPont were cousins of the DuPonts. John W. Gardner is a 60 Illuminatus and in charge of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. I have found the Gardners in the thick of Satanism and witchcraft. The 13 Satanic Bloodlines, Paving the Road to Hell. The complete facts are difficult to discover. At the library, I checked out a book DuPont by William Dutton. The book had been a gift to the library from the DuPont Company. I also checked out a book Alfred I. DuPont by Joseph Fraser Wall. That book's author J. Wall was financed to write the book by the trustees of the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. Although scholarly in appearance, it is what they don't say that can be so crucial to really understand the history of the DuPont family. When the family is worth billions, they can afford to tidy up their family histories, and keep people from spilling the beans about secrets. On May 16, 1893, the press reported the death of Alfred Victor DuPont with great laudatory comments. Alfred, known as Fred, had been in business in Louisville, KT, and was widely known in the area as a philanthropist. Louisville's main paper, the Louisville Commercial, gave the public a totally fictitious story about how Alfred Victor DuPont died, along with many pages of the highest praise. If it hadn't been for the honesty of the Inquirer, a Cincinnati paper, not to be confused with today's national tabloid by the same name Inquirer, the public would not have learned what really had happened. The false story said that Fred died of apoplexy while visiting his brother Biderman. The DuPont family still maintains this fiction is true, although all the facts of the case are blatantly known, and were public knowledge to quite a number of people whose lives were involved with what actually happened. Both Fred DuPont and his nephew Coleman DuPont were regular customers at the most expensive house of prostitution in the area, Maggie Payne's Bordello. Although rich, Fred was not willing to help support a distraught prostitute raise the child she was sure he had sired. So she shot Fred in the heart. Coleman DuPont, who was familiar with Maggie's, soon went down to Maggie's, retrieved the body with a hearse and took the body to Biderman's house. There the coroner was willing to lie on the death certificate that the death was caused by effusive apoplexy. It is most likely Coleman made that lie worth his effort. Henry Watterson, editor of the Courier-Journal, although he later admitted he knew the real story of the murder, went ahead and printed the false story on behalf of the DuPonts. This article starts out with this anecdote to make a point: the 13 top families do control the press, and are very sensitive to any negative publicity of any kind. Not only are their satanic activities deeply hidden, but even just the normal everyday sinfulness or human soapbox drama of their lives is deeply hidden. By the way, Coleman DuPont, an extremely hedonistic man, is one of the DuPonts I strongly suspect was into Satanism. Further secrecy has been obtained by working through trusted proxies. Today, a key proxy is the Jew Irving Saul Shapiro. The DuPont family is represented in a number of groups by Irving Saul Shapiro, who is on the Council of Foreign Relations. Irving S. Shapiro is a key person who has been the go-between to coordinate the activities of the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, and the Watson families. Watson family members who are 6 Degrees Illuminati are mentioned in the January 1, 1993 newsletter. Shapiro was a member of Carter's Advisory Council on Japan-U.S. Economic Relations, is a trustee of the University of Delaware, director of the Jewish Federation of Delaware, director of IBM, which is a Watson Rockefeller business, director of Citicorp, Rothschilds and Rockefellers, headed in the past by 6 Degrees Illuminatis, CFR member, Bilderberger Walter Risson, and the U.S.-USSR Trade and Economic Council, which Rockefeller plays a big part of. Shapiro is or was director of Continental American Insurance Co., International Business Machines, under IBM. Irving Saul Shapiro was chairman of the DuPont Company. Beginning at the beginning. The biographies of the DuPont family usually begin with the marriage of Samuel DuPont to Anne Alexandrine Montechenin in 1737 in Paris, France. Although Anne was a Huguenot, she was a medium with the spirit world. Anne came from an ancient noble family that lived in Burgundy, France. It is quite possible that it was Anne's bloodline that gave the DuPonts their occult power. Anne's bloodline may possibly tie into the House of David. At any rate, Samuel and Anne's son was the first DuPont to rise to greatness, and the first DuPont that can be connected directly to the Illuminati. Samuel and Anne's son was Pierre Samuel DuPont. Later Pierre Samuel added de Nemours to his name to prevent confusion between him and other French legislatures named DuPont. Pierre Samuel DuPont was a genius. Pierre's mother taught him to be a medium with spirits, but early on Pierre had to deny it publicly. His father Samuel could not understand the boy's genius, such as his ability at age 12 to translate Greek and Latin at sight. When Pierre's mother died when he was 16, B no longer had a parent in the family who could understand him, and after getting one of his frequent beatings from his father, he ran away, and was spared near starvation by his uncle Pierre de Montchamp. Initially, Pierre was a watchmaker, but within a short time he attracted the attention of several top Illuminati for his ability to write good tracts, and articles that advocated various economic and political views that they wanted promoted. Pierre joined the Freemasons, and at some point was Illuminized, as most of the French lodges became. Although Pierre went through severe financial difficulties after the French Revolution, B regularly made payments to Masonic organizations in France. Besides being friends with all the famous Masons of the time, one Mason brother of his worthy of note is the French astronomer Lalande, who helped hide him during the Revolution. Someone very powerful protected Pierre Samuel during the French Revolution. This is hinted at by historian Pierre Joly, although Joly never gives his protector's name. I believe he was protected because DuPont was part of the inner Satanic hierarchy. He was also protected by the daughter of Swiss financier Jacques Necker. This daughter was Madame Germaine de Staël. The madame was a close friend of Pierre Samuel and she operated a famous salon, Cat House. Madame de Staël was nothing less than an intimate friend of Saint Simon. She shared his occult revolutionary ideas. Henri de Saint-Simon was a student and friend of Jacques Rigomer-Bazin, who was associated with the inner circle of several occult-based revolutionary groups during Pierre DuPont's time in France. Saint-Simon was the author of the New Christianity, which foreshadowed the creation of international communism. He also wrote in the early 1800s The Globe and the Reorganization of the European Community, laying out ideas and plans for European unity. In the early 1800s, the Saint-Simonians suggested in the early 1800s that the date 2000 be the target date for the new order. In order to rearrange the world into the new order, a number of items and stages needed to occur. 2 canals, one through the Suez and one through Panama, were needed, they said, to create interdependence between the nations. They also suggested a high dam on the Nile. They suggested the technological transformation of the Earth, and the biological creation of a new, androgynous humanoid. Androgynous beings are being produced in underground facilities. They are the small grays used to fly the saucers. Progress would be brought about by a series of revolutions. Study from Fire in the Minds of Men by James H. Billington to understand how the occult fraternities have created all the revolutions since the French Revolution. Saint Simon, an Illuminatus, wanted to have a child with Madame de Staël which would become the Antichrist. It didn't happen, but anyway, it is significant that the person who personally intervened during the French Revolution and saved Pierre Samuel DuPont's life was Madame de Staël. Necker along with Lafayette would later loan DuPont large sums of money for him try out his schemes in business and in forming a communist society. It's interesting that the Physiocrat's journal was Les Éphémérides du Citoyen. The title has astrological occult undertones. On January 1, 1769, Pierre Samuel DuPont took over the journal's management. He became a key leader in France advocating a new order. Pierre Samuel DuPont believed in Plato's idea of government, which included a philosopher king. Pierre Samuel was deist. He spoke of God, but he meant nature's deistic God, not a personal God. He believed nature was a higher God than his mechanical deist God. Notice, the Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence also wrote nature's God. This is because the deists like Jefferson and DuPont believed nature was the highest God. The ambiguity of meaning has permitted people to think Jefferson was referring the Christian God in the Declaration of Independence. It is a common occurrence that Christians assume that others who use words that they use, think like the Christians. Even today, many New Agers have an easy task to snow Christians. For instance, they just say, "I believe in Christ." The Masonic Reference Book, a 10,000 famous Freemasons put out by the Missouri Lodge of Research, provides this about Pierre Samuel DuPont. When 23, he published 2 pamphlets on finances, which attracted the attention of the celebrated Quenet. He then expounded the doctrines of Quenet's school, the Physiocrats. Went to Poland in 1774 at the request of King Stanislaus Augustus, a Freemason, to organize a general system of national education. When Turgot became Controller General of French Finances, DuPont was named Inspector General of Commerce. He was recalled by Virgin to assist in negotiating with England a treaty to accord independence to the U.S. In 1789 he was a member of the States General, but his reactionary views led to his imprisonment in 1792. In 1799 he emigrated to the U.S. with his family, and at Jefferson's request, started on a plan for national education in this country. He returned to France in 1802 and was instrumental in promoting the Treaty of 1803, by which Louisiana was sold to the U.S. Pierre Samuel was a key figure in attempts to create a national education system in both Poland and the new U.S. A national education system was a Masonic, Illuminati goal to control education and take it out of the hands of sincere Christians. Jefferson, who was a Grand Orient Mason of the famous Nine Sisters Lodge, and apparently a key Illuminatus, was a close friend of Pierre Samuel and was instrumental at several key points in Pierre Samuel's life when he needed help. Jefferson arranged for the first gunpowder order, which was a government order, when the DuPonts went into the gunpowder business. Benjamin Franklin, a key leader of several secret occult fraternal groups, was also a close friend of Pierre Samuel. When Benjamin Franklin arrived December 1776 in France, one of the first people who sought out to visit with was Pierre Samuel DuPont. During the next year after that, DuPont was a frequent visitor to Franklin's residence in the village of Passy. In 1783, DuPont expected to sit with Franklin at the treaty table in Paris, but John Adams got the Americans to sign a treaty with Britain without France's involvement. Alexander Hamilton, whose role in the conspiracy is now known, was DuPont's lawyer in the U.S. The next generation. During the second year of Pierre Samuel's marriage to Maid Lady, Victor Maid was born with the Marquis de Merbeau as his godfather. Victor Marie DuPont, 1767–1827, was an aide-de-camp to Illuminatus Lafayette from 1789 to 1792. Whether Victor was a Mason in France before the family came to the United States in 1800, I do not know. Victor Marie DuPont soon got involved in Freemasonry in the United States after arriving. The following are some of the highlights to his secret Masonic career according to Masonic records. 1808 signed a Masonic petition to create a lodge at Angelica, New York. 1813, joined Washington Lodge No. 1 of Delaware. 1814 joined Knights Templars of Wilmington, Del. 1819 Grand Marshal of the Grand Lodge of Delaware, also 1822, 1823, 1825, 1827. 1825, Grand Treasurer of the Grand Lodge of Delaware. Pierre Samuel had two more sons. Paul François, died at age 1 month, and Olivier Aurigny. Olivier Aurigny followed his father's steps in getting illuminated. Olivier Aurigny was a prominent outspoken Jacobin. The Jacobins. The Duc d'Orleans, Grand Master of the Grand Orient of France, that is head of all the French Masons, along with two other key Masons Talleyrand and Merbeau, started the Jacobins. According to the book The War of the Antichrist with the Church, a book made from the lectures of George Dillon, Dublin, Ireland, M. H. Gill and Son, 1885, where Dillon lectures on the French Revolution, he states that both Talleyrand and Merbeau were key Illuminati. The name of the original lodge of the Jacobins was changed to Club Breton and then Jacobin Club. The Jacobins were basically an Illuminized type of Freemasonry. The president of the Jacobin Club was the Freemason Georges Jacques Danton, who was a member of the famous and powerful Nine Sisters Lodge. Lafayette was a Jacobin, as well as the key players in the French Revolution. A very secret body of 300 key Freemasons ruled France secretly during this period, according to the autobiography of Wolfe Tone, Pub. by R. Barry O'Brien, 1893. Robespierre was both a Freemason and an Illuminatus. In fact, he was both a disciple of Weishaupt and Rousseau. Prussian Baron Anacharsis Cloots was also a Freemason and Illuminatus. He also was a disciple of Weishaupt and understood better what Weishaupt was trying to accomplish. If one studies what these men taught, you will discover it as what was later known as socialism and communism. The original idea for all the French Revolution started with the Satanic hierarchy. In November 1793, the true colors of this Satanic-inspired business can be seen in the campaign against religion, where anyone who was a priest in France was killed, and the Illuminati posted one of its mottos in public: "Death is an eternal sleep." Eyewitnesses testify that Satan has a very detailed plan which he entrusts to his very select few at the top. Much of what seems coincidence and unrelated is actually according to a very clever, diabolical, plan. Olivier DuPont was a major printer for the Jacobins. He was a convinced deist and worshipped nature too. A powderman becomes director of the National Bank. Later in the United States, after successfully setting up the best gunpowder factory in the world, Eleuthère DuPont was selected along with his friend Nicholas Biddle to be a director of Hamilton's creation, the United States Bank. Remember that Astor was also selected as a director of this national bank. The Mason Stephen Girard, 1750–1831, initiated into Masonry in 1788 in Charleston, South Carolina, helped establish the Second Bank of United States in 1816 and served as its director. Girard had amassed a $9 million fortune by the time of his death. He was born in France, and become a sea captain. Where his money came from is somewhat of a mystery. He gave large sums of his money to Masonic charity. Early years in America. On January 3, 1800, the DuPont tribe arrived in the United States with grandiose plans. Part of the plans were to create a new society. While Victor Marie and his father pursued grandiose schemes that tailed miserably, Eleuthère DuPont started a gunpowder business in Delaware. Irene's success can be attributed to several factors. The French government gave him top-secret machinery and plans to produce the best gunpowder possible in that day. It was state-of-the-art technology, and they supplied manpower to help get started. The DuPonts had friends in various places that helped them in numerous ways, getting financing, business, land, etc. Eleuthère DuPont was intelligent, worked very hard and worked with patience. If he hadn't had so many commendable qualities, then the DuPont family may have sunk back in history, and another family taken their place. A royal dynasty. The DuPonts are a dynasty of kings. They have been called kings, and rightly so, even if people have been unaware that they are a dynasty of Illuminati kings. I do not know which particular men have served during the Satanic rituals. The family has always had a head of the family. It may be that the most powerful DuPont may also secretly serve as the highest Satanist. I don't know who has been representing the family at the highest levels of secret Satanism. I suspect or surmise it has not been the public head of the family in modern times, but I can list the public head of the family as it passed down through time. Persons below years as head of family generation coming to America. Pierre Samuel DuPont 1739–1817 first. Eleuthère DuPont 1817–1834 second. Alfred Victor DuPont 18,341,850 third. Henry DuPont 1850–1889 third. Henry A. DuPont 1889–4th. These men had great authority over the tribe of DuPonts. The DuPonts had family council where even the women had voting rights. The DuPonts, like the Rothschilds, helped set up their children's marriages, and many of the early ones were to cousins. For instance, much to the delight of the DuPonts, Sophie Madeline DuPont married her cousin Samuel Francis DuPont in 1833. Two of Sophie's drawings occur later in this article. The family owned everything in common, and distributed according to needs and according to the contribution that each could give to the family business. The James Bitterman, the son of Evelina DuPont Bitterman, went to France, and his descendants would give the DuPonts a lineage in France. One of the families that intermarried and were close friends with the DuPonts was the Cazenove family. Both families were close friends with Thomas Jefferson and Albert Gallatin. I have concluded that both Thomas Jefferson and Albert Gallatin were Illuminati. Further, I discovered in a 40-volume set on American Statesmen in Volume 13, p. 386, that Albert Gallatin claimed to be descended from the ancient Roman consul Callatinus. Incredible as it may seem, the black nobility have kept track of their bloodlines. The same people ruling the world today are in many ways the descendants of the rulers in past ages. Antoine Charles Cazenove, born in Geneva, SW, was a business partner with Albert Gallatin. During the War of 1812, the DuPont gunpowder factory, since it was the primary American powder company, was the known target for the British to destroy. However, the British never attacked it. The DuPonts had organized a local militia called the Brandywine Rangers. Interestingly, their militia flag was a beehive on white silk. Lafayette visited the DuPonts in Delaware the summer of 1825. Another important Mason who would visit the DuPonts was Henry Clay, who was the American Secretary of State and head of the Whig Party. Henry Clay was Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Kentucky and Grand Orator for the GL 1806-09. He was one of the Freemasons involved in a high-level meeting that used the U.S. Senate chambers on March 9, 1822 for their meeting. If the DuPonts were already one of the primary top families, it may well be Clay was coming to them for guidance on how to steer the nation. The DuPonts played a role too in the building of the American Capitol, which was laid out and constructed with numerous occult patterns. The next generation, Pierre Samuel's grandchildren. Eleuthère DuPont had a daughter, Sophie Madeleine DuPont, 1810–1888. Sophie was also her mother's name. Sophie Madeleine DuPont, her name Sophia is popular with Maria, wrote diaries, journal voluminous correspondence. Sophie also drew hundreds of drawings and sketches, many of them caricatures of people. Of her sketches, this article reproduces two of them which bear importance to this newsletter. The first is a drawing by Sophie DuPont of one of the DuPonts dressed up like Satan with long paper horns and a tail. Interestingly, according to a December 12, 1829 letter by Sophie to one of her relatives, Sophie comments that the costume of Satan was mistaken for Old Nick. Santa is an anagram for Satan. The next drawing is a drawing that went with a letter from Sophie to Clementina Smith, July 21, 1837, which is a self-portrait of what Sophie calls blackies, black servants, who carried her to her bath in a special chair. This drawing is included to show how wealthy the DuPonts were within a short time after coming to Delaware, USA. Alfred Victor DuPont, who took over as head of both the family and the factories making gunpowder, was married to Meta. Meta was into Swedenborgianism, which was a type of mystical religious Freemasonry, that was based on the Swedish Mason Swedenborg's teachings. Alfred Victor apparently didn't feel anything negative toward this. His wife Meta organized a Swedenborg church in town. Around the Civil War times, the DuPonts became less identified with deism and more identified with the Episcopal Church. Joanna Smith DuPont was instrumental in this change. One of the families that the DuPonts would marry with was the Casanovs, who were Episcopalians, and some members were, I suspect, involved with the Illuminati. Christ Church was built off the DuPont communal property for Episcopal services. By the Civil War, the state of Delaware was lock, stock and barrel under the control of the DuPonts and their friends the Bayards, the Salisburys, and the Grays. In this 20th century, the DuPonts have gotten firmer control. Because the state of Delaware is controlled by the DuPonts, et al., it is worthwhile to examine some of the people the DuPonts and their elite friends have placed into office. This is a very unfinished, skimpy list. I have done only a little research in this direction. Governors of Delaware, chronological order. John Collins, Governor 1819–1822, Collins family. Caleb P. Bennett, Governor 1832–1836, Freemason. Thomas Stockton, Governor 1844, high-ranking Freemason. Charles C. Stockley, Governor 1883–87, Freemason. Benjamin Briggs, Gov. 1887–1891, Freemason. Pierre Samuel DuPont, 1977, also U.S. Representative, and other Gov. Positions. U.S. Senators of Delaware, alphabetical order of surnames. T. Coleman DuPont, Sen. 1921–192, Henry A. DuPont, Sen. 1895, 1896, 1906–1916. In 1896, the U.S. Senate rejected his election and therefore Henry DuPont's credentials due to proof of voter fraud. Delaware legislature, Republican, replaced Henry, a Republican, with a Democrat. But in 1899, when the Senate seat became available and another one in 1901 too, they could not come to any agreement on a selection of a senator because Henry A. DuPont and John Edwards O'Sullivan Addicks, the two Republican leaders, were fighting so much. Consequently, in 1899 Delaware only had one U.S. Senator, and from 1901 to 1903 Delaware had no U.S. senators. L. H. Hisler Ball, 190345,1919-25, also served Del. As State Treasurer, Freemason. James H. Hughes, Senator 1937-42, Freemason, also was Del. Secretary of State. Richard R. Kenny, Senator 1897-1901, Freemason, also Adjutant General of Del. Arnold Naudane, Senator 1830-36, Freemason, Grand Master of the GL of Del, also State Senator 3639. John G. Townsend, Senator 1929-42, Freemason, banker, alternate delegate to the UN General Assembly in 1946. James M. Tunnell, Senator 1941-47, Freemason, 32 degrees, also lawyer. John Wales, Senator 1849-51, Freemason, President of Net. Bank of Wilmington and Brandywine, Second of State of Del. 1845-49. William V. Roth, Jr., Senator 1971, CFR, Trilateral Commission, also on the Rep. Net. Com. The DuPont gunpowder factories dominated the industry. Within only a short time after getting started in 1802 they had the best quality gunpowder in the world for the general market. Every war the United States has fought starting in 1802 with the war against Tripoli, today Abaya, and the Barbary pirates until the incursion into Somalia this last year, the American military has depended upon DuPont gunpowder. Henry DuPont, 1812–1889, took over command of the gunpowder manufacturing when he was 38. He was very authoritarian and was known as Boss Henry. His narrow-minded, backward and authoritarian thinking ran the DuPont company into the ground in spite of their control of the gunpowder market. When he died, Alfred I. DuPont, Pierre Samuel DuPont II, 1870–1954, and Thomas Coleman DuPont, 1863–1930, took over various DuPont manufacturing affairs. This triumvirate revived the aging DuPont factories. They bought out the rest of the gunpowder manufacturers, giving them an absolute monopoly in the munitions industry. They modernized the DuPont factories and put the DuPont businesses back into top shape. On August 22, 1857, the DuPonts lost their first family member to an explosion, Alexis DuPont. The DuPonts had always been in the forefront on safety at their gunpowder factories, but that did not prevent them from having to suffer repeated explosions over the years. An explosion at a gunpowder factory is easily set off and very deadly. The tutor that was hired in 1852 to tutor the DuPont children, R. Page Williamson, described in his letters to Virginia that the DuPont children were very spoiled and difficult to work with. In 1872, Henry DuPont brought together Laughlin and Rand and Hazard Powder Company in order to form a gunpowder trade association. What the association did was to eliminate competition between the three largest manufacturers of gunpowder, and create a monopoly for this cartel. Eventually DuPont bought out the other two plus numerous other small gunpowder companies. I suggest that everyone who believes that the DuPonts and the rest of the elite are capitalists, should take another look at history. These men do not believe in capitalism, they believe in monopolies, which boils down to the same thing that occurs under communism. When these people describe their setting up a monopoly, they call it bringing order and stability to a fragmented and chaotic industry. In 1889, Alfred I. DuPont attempted to bribe French officers in charge of the production of smokeless gunpowder to give the secrets to him. But no amount of bribe would work, as the Frenchmen knew they would lose their lives if they gave the secrets to him. The British were not any more helpful. Youth was not all peaches and cream. Fred was murdered. William DuPont, 1855–1928, was trapped in a marriage with a DuPont cousin, May DuPont, that he didn't want to be married to. Louis Cazenove DuPont, a handsome, intelligent young, committed suicide with a bullet in the library at the Wilmington Club. Alfred was shot in the face by accident on a hunting trip. The DuPont family had their share of heartaches, broken marriages, insanity, etc. When Mary Bellin married into the family, she brought some Jewish blood. As a major part of the budding military-industrial complex, the DuPonts during the 19th century had to work with the Army and Navy. The Army and Navy convinced them to implement a contract with the Koepel Company in Belgium for smokeless powder, which when the formula was received was found to be inferior to what the American were already producing. However, this whole episode ended with the DuPonts going with their own formula and setting up a new plant at Carneys Point in New Jersey. This hits the highlights of the family history in their first 100 years in this nation. To celebrate their first 100 years, every living descendant of the first Pierre Samuel was invited to a great banquet. A building was built to house them. They numbered over 100. At each person's table setting was a special gift of a gold coin, prepared especially to commemorate this centennial. On January 1, 1900, the DuPont tribe celebrated. The DuPonts are shrouded in so much secrecy, that their secrecy is not even known. When Eugene DuPont, the chief executive of the family gunpowder, high-explosive business, died near the turn of the century, none of the other DuPonts hardly even a vague idea of how much the company was worth or what assets it had. At that time the DuPonts had powder plants in PA, Del, Iowa, and TN. The DuPonts are much the same today, except that their assets are perhaps 10 times better hidden, not only from outsiders but from themselves. The DuPonts have in general made their money the hard way by working and producing, in contrast to the other top families. The DuPonts are to be commended on this, even if at times they have been very tight on what they have given their workers. The DuPonts have also shown an amazing ability to keep their dynasty alive. There seems to be an increasing invisibility to their family. Hitting pay dirt. One of the people who had been involved for a short time with the Illuminati, and is now a Christian, told me that they could remember the name the Society of the Cincinnati and that they knew nothing about the organization, but that it had something to do with the Illuminati. But what is this organization? Without anything but the name I began my investigation. At first look it seemed like some old Ladle's genealogy group who are descendants of revolutionary soldiers. However, as I carried out what promised to be a long-term research project on the society, it began to appear that something big was behind this organization. One reference stated, "The Society of the Cincinnati number 1783". It is likely that no Englishman feels a greater sense of pride in being a Knight of the Garter, or Scotsman, a Knight of the Thistle, than an American feels in being a member of the Society of the Cincinnati. Wow. Double wow. Here is an organization that essentially no one I know has even heard about, and yet an American would feel a great sense of pride in belonging to it. Interesting. Not only that, but I knew what the Order of the Garter is. The Order of the Garter is the secret inner group which is an elite group within the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, which is the British part of the Knights of Malta. The Knights of the Garter are the leaders of the Committee of 300. They are diabolical men. Lord Peter Carrington, who is a member of the Satanic Order of Osiris and other demonic groups, is a member of the Order of the Garter. Lord Palmerston is an example from history of another similar example of Knight of the Garter who was totally corrupt, pretended to be a Christian, and practiced Satanism. I found out that the Massachusetts legislature had had some of its senators and representatives concerned for the welfare and safety of the United States, because, according to testimony on record, the Society of Cincinnati was the beginning of a hereditary aristocracy in the U.S. dedicated to subverting the Republic. The Massachusetts legislature declared the Society of the Cincinnati dangerous. And yet, speaking for the public, for all the legislators' trouble, the truth is nobody has even heard of the Society of the Cincinnati, let alone known or guessed it was dangerous. When the United States was created, it operated under the Articles of Confederation. It was a confederation of independent states. Each of the states printed their money, passed their own laws, etc. The federal government was simply a League of Nations type body. The Society of the Cincinnati was partly responsible for getting that changed. The Society of Cincinnati favored very strong central government, a national bank, etc. The Freemason Baron von Steuben is credited with starting the organization. The Mason Pierre L'Enfant, who designed the city of Washington with its hidden occult symbols, also designed the logo for the Society of the Cincinnati. Every president of the United States has worn the diamond eagle jewel of the Society of the Cincinnati. Wow! And I hadn't even heard about it until I got this tip from this ex-Illuminatus. Benjamin Franklin was an honorary member. The Marquis de Lafayette was a member. George Washington and James Monroe were original members. At least 15 presidents have been honorary members. President Franklin Pierce and Zachary Taylor, his father was an original member, were hereditary members. Many of the high-ranking Masons who were also officers in the Revolution were original members. 3 prominent Freemasons who were big in the Society of the Cincinnati were Henry Beekman Livingston, 1750–1831, James Mann, 1759–1832, and Hardy Murphy, 1752–1809. Hardy served as Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of North Carolina beginning in 1789. I noticed that many very busy elite people were spending a lot of money and time on this society, whatever its purpose was. The society had a museum, and a headquarters building in Washington, D.C., on Massachusetts Avenue, and W, and state chapters. But why? The stated purpose of the organization didn't seem to explain the interest people put into the organization. Why spend time belonging to an organization whose only purpose is to commemorate the fact that all its members are descendants of Revolutionary War officers? The purpose of the organization is to render permanent the cordial affection subsisting among the officers. Okay. I can understand a group of officers who are all veterans of a war getting together. But their descendants? We are talking about a war whose fighting basically ended in 1781. That's over 200 years ago. Would my busy descendants care to visit with some other Vietnam vet's great-great-great-grandchildren 200 years from now? Yet, my 1983 World Almanac, which lists in fine print about 1,300 associations, gives the membership of the Society of the Cincinnati at 2,800. Other sources indicated that the organization had an affiliate organization in France. But how? How could an organization which was open to only descendants of select revolutionary officers be so identical in purpose to something in France for Frenchmen? I could understand why, but only if the stated purposes were not the whole story. As you can see, I was very suspicious of the Society of the Cincinnati. It appears I had stumbled onto something big. But I hadn't been able to tie the society in with the Illuminati until I stepped up my research on the DuPonts. The tie-in between the Illuminati and the Society of the Cincinnati came when I began investigating what I thought might turn out to be an obscure person. His name was Leighton Coleman, 1837–19, and he was married to Frances, Fanny, Elizabeth, daughter of Alexis Irene DuPont, 1816–57. Alexis died in an accident. Occult bloodline power can pass through women or men, so it was worth it to investigate Leighton Coleman. Leighton Coleman turned out to be the bishop of the state of Delaware for the Episcopal Church. He was a prime mover in the temperance movement, which I had already discovered was Illuminati-controlled. Further, Leighton was Grand Chaplain of the Grand Lodge of Freemasons in Pennsylvania, Grand Prelate of the Knights Templar, and Chaplain of the Delaware Society of the Cincinnati. Another of the top 13 Illuminati families is the Kennedy family. There is a connection to the Society of the Cincinnati with this family too. Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis, ex-wife to both JFK and Aristotle Onassis, had a grandfather named Major Bouvier, who invented a family genealogy which was mostly fiction, which was self-published in 1925 as Our Forebears, but the fantasy Bouvier genealogy allowed him and his sons Bud and Blackjack to get into the Society of the Cincinnati. See A Woman Named Jackie, by C. David Heyman, p. 18. All three Bouviers were very proud of their memberships and would proudly display their boutonnieres on their label showing membership. The three cousins that saved the DuPont Company in 1902. The successful three DuPonts, Alfred, Coleman, and Pierre, that together took over the gunpowder factories, ended up in some serious infighting after a few years. Alfred divorced his wife to marry his cousin, and the Coleman and many of the others did not approve of the marriage. Alfred and the others got into some serious family infighting. In 1913, Alfred, at one point letting his rage get the better of him, got the Delaware legislature to pass a special law changing his first wife's son's name to spite his first wife. The special law passed the House in 4 hours secretly at Alfred's request, but failed by 2 votes in the Senate after the other DuPonts found out what Alfred was trying. Alfred built his cousin wife Alicia the most expensive house on the East Coast. In 1910 dollars, the lowest estimate is $2 million, but the actual cost may easily have been several times that. The name of the mansion was named Nemours. The main grounds of the Nemours estate are 400 acres enclosed by a 9-foot wall. Broken glass was embedded in the concrete on top of the wall. Beyond the 400 are 2,000 acres that make up the estate. From 1906 until 1920, the DuPont family broke up into 2 factions that waged a civil war in various arenas. Alfred I. DuPont led a political campaign that fought the corruption of Coleman DuPont's forces. Up to that time, politics and voting and vote counting were totally corrupt. By April 1918, Alfred had defeated Coleman for control of Delaware's politics. In 1911, Alfred bought the principal daily paper in the area, the Wilmington Morning News. In 1916, after successfully blocking his uncle Henry A. DuPont from being re-elected, Alfred DuPont bought control of 9 Delaware newspapers. In 1932, on a trip to Egypt, Alfred found a dog named Mummy that was his familiar spirit. In the biography about Alfred which I read, it said, Alfred had scored over his sister Marguerite. Let her collect Virginia ghosts if she wanted them. Only he had a reincarnated Egyptian mascot who could produce wonders as great as those of Aladdin's genie. Alfred DuPont by Joseph F. Whale, p. 593. Alfred L. DuPont himself wrote this in a letter to the Reverend Baker P. Lee, 23rd of May 32, about his familiar spirit. I have 1 or 2 more jobs for Mummy, and then I will give her a vacation before I put her to work again. He wrote at least 1 other letter where he talks about the magical powers of his dog, which was his familiar spirit. Mrs. Cazenove Lee Jr. got a letter mentioning Mummy's powers too. Alfred died in 1935. Ed Bally and Jessie Ball DuPont, his widow, took over control of his estate. Ed Bale increased the Alfred I. DuPont's fortune and became the most powerful man in Florida. Ed Bally's wealth passed the $1 billion mark in the 50s or 60s. In the late 1960s, political enemies were able to attack the wealth of Ed Ball with new legislation and some investigation of the misuse of his money hidden in the foundations. In 1981, Ed Bale died. In 1985, Ed Ball's widow claimed that Ed's sister Jessie had actually murdered Alfred I. DuPont in 1935. She claimed that while Ed was alive she had been too afraid to tell the truth about Alfred's murder. Forbes magazine carried the story in October 1965. T. Coleman DuPont went in business with President Taft's brother Charles P., member of the Skull and Bones, in 1910 to build McAlpin Hotel in New York City. Taft's other brother Horace was a member of the Order of Skull and Bones. In fact, the Taft family, which dates back to Braintree, Mass. in 1679, helped start the Skull and Bones Order, and at least 8 Tafts have been in the order. This was the first of a series of luxury hotels. Coleman bought New York Equitable Life Assurance Society, which was America's largest insurance company. NY Equitable Life Assurance Company undoubtedly brought Coleman in touch with other Illuminati elite. He belonged to the Rittenhouse in Philadelphia. He was the director of a number of things, including the Union National Bank in Wilmington and the president of Central Coal and Iron Company, along with a few other coal and iron companies. T. Coleman has been mentioned already in connection to the DuPont gunpowder business, which he ran for a number of years as head honcho. During WWI, The DuPonts made a mint. The company had $9 million surplus in its treasury. The result was that DuPont absorbed General Motors. 3 World Wars planned by Illuminati Albert Pike in 1871, everything about NWO. The DuPonts also went into the chemical business. The American government had seized the German Die Trust, and the DuPonts were given their patents. The DuPonts began to build a great chemical empire on the synthetic, such as shatterproof glass, paints, rayon, nylon, dyes, photographic film, rubber, chemicals, drugs, etc. Only the Dow Chemical Company is any competition with the DuPont chemical operation. Alfred Victor DuPont, Alfred I.'s son, served only as a private in the Marines during WWI and was on board several ships. And yet for some reason when WWI broke out, he was made a consultant to the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 1943 to 1945. He was an Episcopalian. Emile Francis DuPont, 1898, graduated from Yale, like a number of DuPonts have. He was an important layperson within the Episcopal Church. Pierre Samuel DuPont belonged to the American Philosophical Society. He also wears the rosette of an Officier de la Légion d'Honneur. How or why he got this I haven't found out. He was on Delaware's State Board of Education, 1919 to 21. He was the president of General Motors from 1920-23 when he turned it over to Alfred P. Sloan Jr. Pierre Samuel started what is called the buddy system where DuPont and GM's management worked together. DuPont saved GM from extinction after WWI and has watched over GM since. Robert L. DuPont, Jr. is a research psychiatrist. He has done research at Harvard. He was the delegate for the U.S. at United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs, 1973-78. He is especially knowledgeable about what drugs will do to a person, which lit an area of his research. And Frances Marguerite DuPont, born 1944 in Duluth, Minnesota, is deep into research into genetics. Those of us, who know what these people want to do, cringe when we see that some of the top genetic researchers are connected with satanic families. Every American almost every day uses a DuPont product. When I began learning what the DuPont industries produce, it is utterly astonishing. Anything that involves chemicals is under their production. Herbivores and fertilizers for farming, cosmetics and nylons for women, chemicals for all types of industrial production, textiles of all kinds, cleaning fluids such as when your clothes are dry cleaned. The list can go on and on. Most of us are using DuPont products almost continuously all through the day. General Motors, the explosives and gunpowder monopoly, the chemical monopoly, which its tens of thousands of products, gives the DuPonts enormous financial leverage. The DuPonts obviously are in close cooperation with the elite involved with oil because so many of their products are derivatives of petroleum products. In 1940, it was estimated the DuPont family was worth $5 billion. Today, their total worth must be many billions of dollars, not to mention the enormous power they wield. The very survival of the United States military is dependent upon the military products of the DuPonts. The DuPont company used as a tool to bring U.S. into the New Order. Although the DuPont companies, the principal DuPont company is E.L. DuPont de Nemours & Co., whose 1991 revenues were $38.7 billion, are run by many executives who are not DuPonts. The DuPont family does quietly pull the strings in the background. Many of the executives are men whose philosophy of life matches the DuPonts. It is very clear that the DuPont companies are being used in a big way to move us toward the New World Order. The first item on this concerns how the DuPont workers are being indoctrinated. I received a video of the Pecos River training near Santa Fe, New Mexico, that DuPont workers in the East are sent to. I also looked at a magazine article about this training, indoctrination. In the article Go Take a Flying Leap, for the company, Successful Meetings June 1992, pp. 5962. A Christian brother who worked for the DuPonts in Tennessee has been secretly undermining the efforts of the DuPont company leaders to turn the workers into New Agers. With the help of Christians in the plant, This Christian brother finds out what is planned, and then does his homework so that he can prove to the workers how New Age ideas are being brought in to subvert their thinking. The company changed from calling all its people employees to calling them initiates. The people at the plant were to all be sent to the Pecos River training by DuPont, but due to the exposure of their New Age subversion, people are not allowing themselves to be led by the nose. This brother sent me a video of the Pecos River training. And there are scenes in it where strangers are kissing each other. Well, not exactly strangers, because the training is designed to break down individuality and to create a group think with intimacy. Initiates are taught don't slay the ego is your servant. Another magazine article in June 1992, p. 1516, tells about the 5 types of thinking that the DuPont company is trying to instill in their people. They are 1. Lateral thinking, 2. Metaphoric thinking, 3. Positive thinking, this is also called visualization or in the occult witchcraft, 4. Association trigger, 5. Rapturing and interpreting dreams. An employee environmental awards program was installed where employees can win money by submitting their environmental suggestions. Personal Journal August, 92, pages 60 to 71. Many of the readers of this newsletter are already aware of how the environmental issue is contrived and controlled by the elite. One of the items our New Age Department of Education Secretary Alexander tried to get going was for education to shift from the schools to the factories. This is a process that the Illuminati want to implement to further take us into a total slave state. Interestingly, DuPont has been getting into the act by spearheading Delaware's BRT task force, in which students will attend seminars at DuPont facilities. The DuPont company is employing AI that is artificial intelligence. The neural networks are to the point they can learn from their mistakes. DuPont is taking us into brave new world. They were the first ones to initiate with Fax Now, a rapid customer service called Fax on Demand. DuPont is now in the process of becoming totally global. They already have plants in a number of South American countries.
Please like us and share with your social media. Please subscribe and click the bell to be notified of our new videos.
Remember to check out our playlist for important intel you may have missed.
Be sure to enter our subscriber appreciation $100 monthly giveaway. The link is in our description.
And visit our sister channel. Event is coming soon. For additional intel and information, stay tuned. Victory of the Light.